Hi, I'm Sophia. 3 years ago, my parents pushed me off their private jet, told me, "Coach is where you belong," and left me stranded at a foreign airport. They believed every fabricated accusation my stepsister made about me without asking a single question. That night, I made one call that would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was one of those crisp September mornings in Geneva when the air feels like expensive crystal, clear, thin, and somehow worth more than it should be. I remember adjusting my cashmere scarf before boarding my family's Gulfstream G650, the wind whipping across the tarmac as if trying to warn me to turn back. My father's message had been casual. Wheels up at 9. Family meeting on board. Business matters. Nothing unusual for the Reynaud family. We lived our lives between continents, between board meetings and charity galas, between showing the world what wealth could build and hiding what it sometimes destroyed. I thought maybe we'd be discussing the upcoming merger, or perhaps my younger stepsister Isabel's latest PR crisis at the Paris Fashion Week. I certainly didn't expect what waited for me inside that $12 million flying fortress. The moment I stepped aboard, I felt it. The atmosphere thick as fog. Everyone already seated like they'd been waiting. My father, Antoine Reynaud, tech mogul and venture capitalist extraordinaire, didn't stand to greet me. He simply looked up from his tablet, his steel gray eyes as cold as the altitude we'd soon reach. "You're late," he said, though I was precisely on time. "Traffic from the hotel," I offered, still smiling, scanning the cabin for clues. My stepmother Vivian sat perfectly poised, her Birkin bag placed just so on the cream leather seat beside. Her manicured fingers intertwined like she was praying for patience. Isabel, my stepsister, was already sipping champagne despite the early hour, a satisfied curl to her lips that made my skin prickle with unease. And my half-brother Claude was there too, staring at his phone, feigning disinterest in what was clearly a coordinated ambush. "Sophia," my father said, "we need to discuss some concerning developments. Take a seat." I chose the single chair facing all of them, the isolation immediately apparent. The engines hummed to life outside, vibrating through the hull as the pilots prepared for takeoff. "I'll be direct," my father continued as we began taxiing. "The board received documents yesterday showing unauthorized transfers from the Reynaud Foundation accounts. Significant amounts, all traced back to your personal offshore account in the Caymans." I blinked, my brain struggling to process the accusation. "What? I don't have an offshore account in the Caymans." Isabel slid a folder across the polished walnut table between us. Inside was a stack of transaction records with highlighted sections, all bearing what appeared to be my electronic signature. A forgery, but a good one. "And that's not all," Isabel added, her French accent thickening as it always did when she was performing. "She's been leaking confidential acquisition plans to Julian Mercer at Apex Technologies." Julian. The name struck like a physical blow. We'd been seeing each other discreetly for months, both of us knowing how my father would react to me dating the son of his biggest competitor. "He's been seen leaving your apartment at odd hours." Claude finally looked up from his phone. "Interesting timing, considering the leaked merger information that cost us $30 million in the Nexus deal last month." "That's absurd," I said, my voice rising with genuine shock. "Julian and I are not the issue," my father interrupted. "The issue is trust, Sophia, and loyalty." Vivienne finally spoke, her voice soft yet somehow more cutting than the others. "We also know about the private investigator you hired to look into Claude's past. The board doesn't appreciate potential succession battles being made public." My mind raced. I had never hired anyone to investigate Claude. This was madness. Fabrications piled upon fabrications. "This is insane," I said, struggling to maintain composure as the plane lifted off the ground. I haven't done any of this. Someone is setting me up. Enough! My father slammed his hand on the table. The evidence is conclusive. The board has voted unanimously this morning. You're removed from your position as head of innovation, effective immediately. Your company's shares will be held in trust until further notice. The plane reached cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and my entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything I'd built over the past decade, my reputation, my projects, my place in the company, gone in minutes, based on lies. This is a mistake, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Someone has manipulated these documents. If you'd just let me explain. The time for explanations is past, my father said with finality. We land in New York in 6 hours. You'll be taking a commercial flight back to Seattle from there. Your office has already been cleared. Commercial flight, the ultimate Reynaud insult. In our world, being relegated to coach was worse than being disowned. It was being erased from the narrative entirely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You're making a catastrophic mistake, I said, looking from face to face, searching for any flicker of doubt. There was none. Vivienne glanced at her watch. I think we're done here. Sophia, the flight attendant, has your new ticket information. You'll be departing for Seattle from JFK economy class. Consider it a lesson in humility. Isabel couldn't hide her smirk any longer. Coach is where you belong anyway. All those ordinary people you claim to care so much about in your little innovation projects. The flight attendant appeared. At my side, a sympathetic look quickly masked by professionalism. Ms. Reynaud, we'll be landing briefly in London before continuing to New York. The captain has arranged for your transition there. Transition. Such a polite word for exile. I stood, legs somehow supporting me despite feeling like the floor had disappeared. You'll regret this, I said quietly. Not because I'll seek revenge, but because when you finally realize the truth, it will be too late to undo the damage. I gathered my carry-on and moved to the plane's rear lounge area, as far from them as possible in the confined space. The flight attendant, Marta, followed me. I'm so sorry, Ms. Reynaud, she whispered, sliding me a glass of water. I've worked for your family for 7 years. I've never seen anything like this. Thank you, Marta, I said, my voice hollow. Could you tell me who's flying today? Is it Captain Chen? No, it's Captain Alvarez today. He's been with your father's fleet for nearly a decade. Captain Rafael Alvarez. The name struck a chord of hope in my chest. He had been my father's most trusted pilot for years, but few knew he had once been my mentor when I'd briefly pursued a pilot's license during college, a hobby my father had dismissed as playing with toys. Could you ask him to come speak with me when he has a moment? Tell him it's important. Marta hesitated, glancing toward the main cabin. I'll try. We land in London in about 2 hours. As she left, I stared out the window at the endless blue. 30,000 feet below was the real world, where actions had consequences and evidence required verification. Up here, in the rarefied air of ultra-wealth, perception often outweighed reality. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through secure messages from the past few weeks. Nothing from Julian about company information, just the usual mix of inside jokes and plans for dinner. I had been careful, knowing how my father would react to our relationship, but I'd never leaked confidential information. The offshore account. Documents looked remarkably authentic. Account numbers, transfer dates, electronic signatures that mimicked mine perfectly. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to frame me. But who would benefit from my removal? Claude was the obvious suspect. As my half-brother, he'd always resented that I, despite being younger, had been given leadership of the innovation division over him. But this level of sophisticated forgery seemed beyond him. This felt like Isabel's handiwork. She had connections throughout the tech and banking worlds from her years as the family's social butterfly. What I couldn't understand was why now? What had changed to make them move against me? I pulled out my tablet and discreetly accessed my personal cloud storage, something not connected to the family accounts. I needed evidence, something to prove my innocence. I began downloading my own financial records, email archives, calendar appointments, anything that might contradict their accusations. An hour later, there was a soft knock on the lounge door. Captain Alvarez entered, his uniform impeccable as always, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Reynaud," he said formally, aware we might be overheard. "You asked to speak with me?" "Yes, Captain. Thank you for coming." I gestured to the seat across from me. "I wanted to discuss the London landing procedures. I may need to disembark there rather than continuing to New York." He nodded slightly, understanding this was code. "Of course. May I?" He gestured to my tablet. I handed it to him, and he made a show of examining something, speaking in a normal tone about landing conditions while typing a message. "What's happening? Your father instructed unusual security protocols for this flight." I typed back, "Being forced out of company, framed, need your help in London." His eyebrows raised slightly, but his voice remained steady as he discussed weather patterns. He typed, "Serious accusations. Evidence? Fabricated documents. Offshore. Accounts I never opened. Need to secure data before landing in NY. They'll erase everything." Captain Alvarez had known me since I was 21, had taught me to navigate through storms both in the air and in life. He'd seen firsthand my dedication to the company, my integrity in business dealings. He handed the tablet back, speaking aloud. "We'll be landing at Heathrow in approximately 50 minutes, Ms. Reynaud. I'll make sure the ground team is prepared for any changes to your itinerary." On the tablet, he'd written, "We'll help. Trust me." After he left, I felt the first, glimmer of hope. I wasn't entirely alone. I had allies, even if they weren't blood relations. I spent the next hour meticulously documenting everything, creating secure backups, sending encrypted files to trusted contacts. When the plane began its descent into London, my father appeared in the lounge doorway. "You've been conspicuously quiet," he said, studying me with narrowed eyes. "No protests of innocence? No tearful pleas?" I met his gaze steadily. Would they have made any difference? "No," he admitted. "The evidence is too comprehensive." "Evidence can be manufactured," I replied. "Trust should be earned through years of loyalty, not destroyed by a single morning of accusations." Trust is a luxury, Sophia, not a right. In this family, in this business, we can't afford the risk of betrayal. "Then you've already lost more than you know." He turned to leave, then paused. "By the way, your access to all Reynaud systems has been revoked. Your company devices will be collected before you leave the aircraft." The plane touched down smoothly on London's runway. As we taxied toward the private terminal, Marta approached with an apologetic expression. "Ms. Reynaud, I need to collect your company phone and tablet before you disembark." I handed them over without protest. I'd already transferred what I needed. "Thank you for everything, Marta. Take care of yourself." The plane came to a stop. The main door opened, revealing the sleek interior of Heathrow's VIP terminal. A suited man waited at the foot of the stairs, clearly security to ensure my departure. My family remained seated as I gathered my belongings. No goodbyes, no final words. Just the cold silence of people who had already written me out of their story. As I reached the door, Captain Alvarez appeared from the cockpit. "Ms. Reynaud," he said formally, handing me what appeared to be a flight information printout. "Your connection details." Our eyes met briefly. Inside the folded paper was a handwritten note. "Private exit through pilot's lounge. Car waiting." Black BMW, license LR21KSP. I nodded my thanks and descended the stairs into the terminal. The security man approached. Ms. Reynaud, I'm to escort you to the commercial terminal. Of course, I said pleasantly. I just need to use the restroom first. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll wait outside. The VIP terminal's restroom was more like a luxury spa, with private shower suites and a separate lounge area. I locked myself in one of the shower rooms, quickly changed my appearance, hair up, glasses on, different jacket, and slipped out through the attendant's service door that Captain Alvarez had indicated on his note. The pilot's lounge was accessed through a keypad-secured door. The code he'd written worked. Inside, several off-duty crew members barely glanced up from their conversations. I moved confidently, as if I belonged, through the room and out the side exit that led directly to a staff parking area. The black BMW was idling exactly where promised. I slid into the passenger seat to find not a hired driver, but Julian Mercer, himself. Julian? I gasped. How? Alvarez called me, he said, pulling away from the curb. Said you were in trouble. What the hell is happening, Sophia? The reality of the situation hit me all at once. The accusations, the betrayal, the loss of everything I'd worked for. After hours of maintaining composure, something in me finally cracked. My shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. Julian reached over and squeezed my hand. It's okay. You're safe now. We'll figure this out. As we drove away from the airport, I could see the Reynaud jet through the terminal windows, still parked on the tarmac. Little did they know that their perfect plan had just developed its first significant flaw. They think I've been leaking company information to you, I said finally, wiping away tears. Among other things, they've fabricated evidence, kicked me out of the company, stranded me here. Julian's jaw tightened. That's insane. We've been careful never to discuss business. Someone's setting you up. But who? And why now? I pulled out my personal phone, thankfully not a company device, and checked for any news that might explain the timing. There it was, buried in the business section of the Financial Times. Reynaud Technologies preparing for historic IPO. Sources say. The IPO. Of course. The company was finally going public after 3 generations as a private entity. My innovation division's projects represented over 40% of the company's projected valuation. If I were removed, whoever controlled those projects would stand to make billions when the company went public. It's about the IPO, I said, showing Julian the article. They're pushing me out before the filing. That's worth billions to them, Julian agreed, navigating through London traffic. But why frame you instead of just firing you? Because my employment contract includes an integrity clause. If I'm terminated for cause, especially for something like financial fraud or corporate espionage, I lose all my equity stakes and intellectual property claims. Julian whistled low. And how much is that worth? Conservatively, about $3 billion. I stared out the window, watching London's landmarks slide by. Where are we going? My company's flat in Mayfair. It's secure, private. We can regroup there. He glanced at me. What's your next move? I took a deep breath, mind racing through scenarios. I need to secure proof of who's behind this before they can cover their tracks. Once the Reynaud jet lands in New York, they'll realize I've gone off script. We don't have much time. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. This is Alvarez. Your family is in a panic. Security breach alert issued when you didn't appear at commercial terminal. They've grounded the jet in London pending your location. Your father is furious. I smiled for the first time that day. They've panicked, I told Julian. The jet is grounded in London while they look for me. Julian's eyebrows rose. That buys us some time, but they'll have resources searching for you. Yes, but they'll be looking for Sophia Reynaud, dutiful, daughter and disgraced executive. I pulled the elastic from my ponytail, letting my hair fall loose around my shoulders. Not Sophia Chen, the woman who once dreamed of being a pilot instead of an heiress. We arrived at a discreet building with an underground parking garage. The elevator required a key card to access the penthouse floor. Julian's company apartment was minimalist, but luxurious. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Hyde Park, state-of-the-art, security, and thankfully, a powerful secure network connection. "Make yourself at home," Julian said. "I'll get us some food and supplies. You should rest." But rest was the furthest thing from my mind. I needed to work fast to uncover who had framed me before they could clean up their digital footprints. I connected to Julian's secure network and began the process of recovering my personal email archives, financial records, and other data I'd managed to secretly back up over the years, a paranoid habit that now seemed prophetic. I started with the forged offshore account documents. The digital signatures looked perfect at first glance, but every electronic signature has metadata, invisible timestamps, IP addresses, and authentication methods. If I could prove these had been created recently or from a device that wasn't mine, I'd have my first piece of evidence. Hours passed as I worked, Julian returning with food that went largely untouched. My eyes burned from staring at screens, but I was making progress. The signatures had indeed been forged, created using a sophisticated program that mimicked handwriting patterns. More importantly, I'd traced the account creation back to a private banking office in Zurich, one I'd never visited, but where Isabel maintained several accounts. "It's Isabel," I told Julian as he handed me a much-needed coffee. "She's the one who set this up. But why would my father believe her without verification? He's too careful for that." "Unless he wanted to believe it," Julian suggested quietly. "Have you considered that he might be in on it?" The thought had occurred to me, but I'd pushed it away. My father was many things, ruthless, demanding, often cold, but I'd never known him to be deliberately dishonest. Still, the IPO represented a once-in-a-generation wealth opportunity. People had betrayed family for far less. "I need more evidence," I said. "Something concrete linking either Isabel or my father to the forgeries." Julian hesitated, then said, "I might be able to help with that. Apex has some resources that could access Reynaud's internal systems." I looked up sharply. "You mean hack them? That would make their accusations about corporate espionage true." "Not hack," he clarified. "We have legitimate partner access to certain shared systems. If we're careful, we could find what you need without crossing any legal lines." I considered it briefly, then shook my head. "No. When I clear my name, it needs to be absolutely clean. No gray areas they can use against me later." Julian nodded, respecting my decision. "Then what's the alternative?" I thought about it, then smiled slowly. "We don't need to break in. We just need someone who already has access, and I think I know just the person." I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Dr. Helena Wei speaking." "Helena, it's Sophia Reynaud. I need your help, and it can't wait." Dr. Wei had been the Reynaud Technologies Chief Research Officer for over 20 years. She'd been my mentor when I first joined the company and one of the few people who'd supported my innovation initiatives when my father had dismissed them as charity projects. If anyone would help me, it would be her. "Sophia, I heard rumors. Something about you being removed from the company. What's happening?" "It's complicated, and I don't have much time. I've been framed. I need access to the internal security. Logs for the document verification system. Can you help me?" There was a long pause. "That's a significant request. Those logs are restricted." "I know. But if you don't help me, the innovation division, everything we've built together, will be dismantled and restructured for the IPO. Projects abandoned, teams dissolved, Patents redirected. Another pause, then a sigh. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for the work. For the people whose lives will be changed by what we're developing. Thank you, Helena. I'll send you secure transfer details. After ending the call, I explained to Julian who Dr. Wei was and why I trusted her. If anyone has both the access and the integrity to help, it's her. Julian looked impressed. You've built more allies than your family realizes. I've tried to treat people with respect, I said simply. Something my family never quite understood. While waiting for Dr. Wei's data, I continued piecing together what evidence I had. The timeline was becoming clearer. The forgeries had begun appearing approximately 3 months ago, shortly after the first confidential IPO discussions. Small financial discrepancies at first, then escalating to the larger transfers that had triggered today's confrontation. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Captain Alvarez. Update. Your father has ordered the jet to continue to New York without finding you. He's in contact with London security services. Claims you've stolen company property. Be careful. I showed Julian the message. They're escalating, making me sound dangerous. We should move, Julian said, already gathering our things. This place might not be safe for long. Where can we go that the Reynauds can't reach? Julian thought for a moment. My family has a house in the Cotswolds. It's under a different name, off the usual radar. We can work from there until we have what we need. As we prepared to leave, my phone lit up with an encrypted file transfer from Dr. Wei. The security logs, 3 months' worth of access records, document verification timestamps, and user authentication data. This was exactly what I needed. We took a series of precautionary measures leaving London, switching cars twice, using cash only, avoiding main roads with CCTV coverage. The Reynaud's influence was extensive, but not omnipotent. There were still ways to move unseen if you knew the blind spots. The Cotswolds house was a surprise, not the sleek modern mansion I'd expected from the Mercer family, but a charming old stone farmhouse surrounded by rolling hills and ancient trees. Inside, however, was a different story, fully modernized, with high-speed internet and secure communications. My grandfather bought this place decades ago, Julian explained. It's registered to a shell company that's not connected to Apex or the Mercer name. We should be safe here while we work. I immediately set up a workstation and began analyzing the security logs from Dr. Wei. Julian brought tea and settled in beside me, offering another set of eyes on the complex data. The logs were dense with technical information, timestamps, user IDs, access protocols, but certain patterns began to emerge. 3 accounts had accessed the document verification system during unusual hours. My father's, Isabel's, and one belonging to Theodore Winters, the company's chief financial officer and my father's oldest friend. There, I pointed to a specific entry. The offshore account documents were verified at 3:17 a.m. on August 28th, supposedly by my authentication credentials. But look at the IP address. It's from inside the Reynaud Tower in Seattle. I was in Tokyo that day for the medical technology conference. Julian leaned closer. That's definitive proof of forgery. Yes, but not of who did it. I continued scanning the logs. We need to cross-reference the IP addresses with building access records, see who was physically present in the tower when these documents were created. Further analysis revealed a disturbing pattern. Whenever fraudulent documents appeared under my credentials, Isabel's authentic credentials showed activity in the system just minutes before or after. In several instances, both our accounts were active simultaneously. From the same IP address, a technical impossibility if we were separate individuals. She used her legitimate access to facilitate the forgeries, I realized. But she couldn't have done this alone. The technical sophistication is beyond her capabilities. Then I found it, the smoking gun. A system override using CFO Winters. Master credentials to grant Isabel's account temporary administrative privileges to the document verification system. The override included a digital note. Temporary access granted as per AR instruction. For pre-IPO audit purposes only. AR, Antoine Reynaud, my father. He knew, I whispered, the betrayal hitting me anew. He authorized this. Julian squeezed my shoulder gently. I'm sorry, Sophia. I sat back, mind racing. But why? Why go to these lengths? They could have just pushed me out normally, offered me a settlement. Because they need your projects for the IPO valuation, but they don't want you to get the credit or the financial rewards, Julian reasoned. This way, they keep everything. The innovation division, the patents, the projected billions, and you get nothing. Not even your reputation. The full weight of it settled on me. My own family had conspired to destroy me professionally, to steal my work, my reputation, my future, all for money they already had more than enough of. The cold calculation of it was breathtaking. So what now? Julian asked. You have proof of the forgery, but taking this public could tank the IPO. Your father would fight back with everything he has. I considered our options. Going public would be mutually assured destruction. I'd clear my name but destroy billions. In company value, affecting thousands of employees in the process. A legal battle would be lengthy, expensive, and ugly, with no guarantee of justice. There had to be another way. One that would secure my future without destroying what I'd helped build. I need leverage, I said finally, something they want more than they want me gone. Julian raised an eyebrow. Such as? I smiled slowly as the plan formed in my mind. The innovation pipeline, the next 3 years of projects that aren't yet in the company's systems, the ones that would triple our valuation after the IPO. You have those? Not in any documented form. They exist only in here. I tapped my temple. Ideas, connections, possibilities I've been developing but haven't formally proposed yet. The board knows they exist. I've hinted at their potential, but only I know exactly what they are and how to implement them. Julian looked impressed. So you offer them a deal? Your silence and cooperation in exchange for what? In exchange for my rightful place and compensation. Not as an employee, but as a major shareholder and board member with protected status. I began pacing, energy returning as the plan took shape. And one more thing, complete autonomy for the innovation division with Dr. Wei and my team secured regardless of the IPO outcomes. It's risky, Julian cautioned. Your father isn't used to being cornered. Neither am I replied. But I think I've learned from the master. I spent the next 2 days preparing meticulously, organizing the evidence, drafting proposal, documents, securing backups of everything in multiple locations. I needed to be bulletproof before confronting my family. On the morning of the 3rd day, I received another message from Captain Alvarez. Your family has returned to Seattle. Security alerts still active for you globally. They're presenting a united front to the board about your unfortunate breakdown and removal. It was time to make my move. I called Dr. Wei again. The board is meeting tomorrow for final IPO preparation, she confirmed. All major shareholders and executives will be present. Perfect, I said. I need one more favor, Helena. The biggest one yet. When she heard my request, there was a long silence. Then, surprisingly, a laugh. You truly are Antoine's daughter, aren't you? Just not in the way he expected. I'll do it. The following morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror in Julian's Cotswolds hideaway, studying my reflection like it belonged to a stranger. My designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple black turtleneck and tailored pants I'd purchased with cash from a local boutique. My normally perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and I'd switched my usual contacts for the glasses I rarely wore. It wasn't a disguise exactly, more like armor. Julian appeared in the doorway behind me, our eyes meeting in the mirror. "You look ready for battle," he said softly. "That's the idea." I turned to face him. The Reynauds respect power above all else. If I show up looking broken, they've already won. He handed me a cup of coffee, our fingers brushing briefly. "Are you sure about this approach? It's not too late to consider legal channels." I sipped the coffee, letting its warmth steady me. Legal battles would take years. By then, they'll have laundered everything I built into their legacy. I can't let that happen. The plan was audacious, perhaps even reckless. I would walk straight into the Lion's Den, the Reynaud Technologies headquarters in Seattle, and confront my family and the board simultaneously. No warnings, no negotiations beforehand. Just the raw power of truth and the leverage I'd carefully assembled. "What if they simply have security remove you?" Julian asked, voicing the concern. We'd been dancing around. "That's where Dr. Wei comes in. She's arranged for me to have temporary access credentials under a consultant ID. I'll be inside before they know I'm in the building." I checked my secure phone, untraceable, purchased with cash. And she's confirmed the board meeting starts at 10 a.m. All the players will be in one room. Julian nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I got you something, for luck." Inside was a simple platinum pendant on a chain, a tiny, perfect compass. "So you never lose your true north," he said, helping me fasten it around my neck. "No matter how they try to disorient you." The gesture nearly broke my carefully constructed composure. I'd spent my entire life in a family that gave lavish gifts as substitutes for genuine connection. This small token, given with honest care, meant more than all the luxury items that had ever been pushed my way. "Thank you," I whispered, tucking the compass beneath my turtleneck close to my skin. 6 hours and 3 flights later, all booked, under false names, paid in cash. I stood across the street from Reynaud Tower in downtown Seattle. The 60-story glass monolith reflected the rare clear sky, the company logo emblazoned near the top like a modern coat of arms. I'd helped design that building, insisted on the sustainable materials and energy systems that made it an architectural marvel. Now I was skulking outside like an intruder. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Wei. "Security rotation complete. Use entrance B2, service elevator to 58. Keycard will work for 15 minutes only." I crossed the street with measured steps, projecting the confidence of someone who belonged. The service entrance was tucked away from the main lobby, used primarily by maintenance staff and caterers. I scanned the borrowed keycard and held my breath until the light flashed green. The service elevator was empty, industrial, so different from the main elevators with their touchscreen panels and panoramic views. I pressed 58, the executive floor, one below the boardroom level, and felt my stomach drop as the car began its rapid ascent. Dr. Wei was waiting when the doors opened, her usual immaculate lab coat replaced by a formal suit for the board meeting. Her eyes widened slightly at my transformed appearance. "You look different," she said, quickly ushering me into a small conference room. "That's the idea." She handed me a tablet. "I've loaded everything you requested. The meeting started 5 minutes ago. Your father is presenting the pre-IPO valuation, projections. And the board members? All present, full attendance." She hesitated. "Sophia, are you absolutely certain about this approach? Once you walk into that room, there's no turning back." I thought about the weeks of betrayal, the years of diminishment, the lifetime of conditional acceptance. "I'm certain. Some bridges need to be burned so you can build better ones." Dr. Wei nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small recording device. "I took the liberty of ensuring the boardroom security cameras will experience a brief malfunction during your appearance. But this will capture everything that's said, for your protection." I took it gratefully. You've risked a lot to help me, Helena. Why? She smiled sadly. Because 20 years ago, I watched your father do something similar to his own brother. History repeating itself. I stayed silent then. I won't make that mistake twice. The revelation stunned me. I knew my uncle had left the company decades ago, but the family narrative was that he'd chosen academia over business. Another erasure, another convenient story. Thank you, I said, meaning it more deeply than words could express. We synchronized our watches. Dr. Wei would return to the boardroom first. 5 minutes later, I would make my entrance. Timing was everything. I needed to interrupt at precisely the moment when my father would be most vulnerable. During his presentation of the Innovation Division's contribution to the IPO valuation. Those 5 minutes stretched like hours. I reviewed the evidence one last time, organized in a digital folder labeled simply Truth. Forged documents with their damning metadata. Security logs showing the conspiracy. Email threads between Isabel and CFO Winters discussing how to solve the Sophia problem before the IPO filing. And my leverage. A detailed outline of the next-generation projects only I fully understood, with projected valuations that would make even jaded board members salivate. My watch vibrated. It was time. I took the private executive staircase to the 59th floor, my borrowed keycard granting access one final time. Through the glass wall, I could see the boardroom, 14 people seated around a massive table, my father standing at the head with a presentation displayed on the wall behind him. I recognized the slides. They were showcasing my work, the medical technology innovations, the sustainable energy solutions, the patent portfolio I'd built over a decade, all with my name carefully removed from every credit. The erasure was complete, or so they thought. I pushed open the door without knocking. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, expressions ranged from confusion to shock to, in Isabel's case, undisguised horror. My father recovered first, his face smoothing into practiced neutrality. This is a private meeting. Security will be here momentarily. I smiled, closing the door behind me. I'm sure they will, but you might want to hear what I have to say first. It concerns the IPO valuation you're currently discussing. I nodded toward the presentation screen. Specifically, those innovation projects you're taking credit for. The board chairman, Frederick Lawson, peered at me over his glasses. Ms. Reynaud, this is highly irregular. Your father informed us of your separation from the company. I imagine he did. I moved confidently to the empty chair beside Dr. Wei. But I suspect he left out some crucial details, like how that separation was engineered using forged documents and false accusations. Forgeries that, interestingly, have electronic timestamps and IP addresses that trace directly back to this building to accounts accessed by my stepsister and your CFO. Isabel's face drained of color. Winters shifted uncomfortably in his seat. These are serious allegations, Lawson said, looking between me and my father. They're not allegations. They're facts. Facts I've documented meticulously. I connected my tablet to the room's display system, replacing my father's presentation with my own evidence file. I've prepared copies for each of you. My father's. Composure cracked slightly. This is absurd. You were removed for cause, financial impropriety and corporate espionage. The evidence was conclusive. The evidence was fabricated, I replied calmly, bringing up the first document, the forged offshore account statement. This document shows transfers supposedly authorized by me on August 28th at 3:17 a.m. from an IP address in this building. I was presenting at a medical technology conference in Tokyo at that exact time, as the company's own travel records will confirm. I clicked through to security logs, highlighted sections showing the damning patterns. These system logs show Isabel's credentials accessing the document verification system immediately before and after my credentials were supposedly used. An impossibility if we were different people in different locations. The board members were leaning forward now, expressions growing more concerned with each revelation. Furthermore, I continued, bringing up the email threads, these communications between Ms. Reynaud and Mr. Winters discuss, and I quote, solving the Sophia problem before the IPO filing, dated 3 months ago, well before any alleged misconduct on my part. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. My father's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. You've manipulated these records, he accused, but his voice lacked conviction. Have I? Then you won't mind if we have an independent forensic analysis performed. I've already secured the original logs with blockchain verification to prevent any retroactive alterations. I looked directly at the board members. But the real question isn't whether I was framed, it's why. I switched to the next slide, the IPO valuation breakdown. The innovation division I built represents 43% of the company's projected IPO value. Projects I conceptualized, teams I assembled, patents under my leadership. By removing me for cause, rather than negotiating a proper separation, certain people stood to gain billions while ensuring I received nothing, not even credit for my work. The board chairman removed his glasses, his expression grave. Mr. Reynaud, these allegations require immediate investigation. My father's face hardened into the expression I'd seen countless times, the look that preceded someone's destruction. This is a family matter that's been distorted for dramatic effect. My daughter has been experiencing emotional difficulties. Stop. The word came not from me, but from Dr. Wei, who had remained silent until now. Antoine, enough. I've worked for this company for 20 years. I've watched Sophia build the innovation division from nothing into what it is today. There is no emotional difficulty. There is only someone refusing to be erased. My father turned to her, betrayal flashing across his features. You helped her? I helped the truth, she replied simply. The room fell silent as the implications settled. Board members exchanged glances. The company secretary was frantically taking notes. Isabel stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I let the tension build before delivering my final, aye. You all have a decision to make, I said, addressing the board directly. You can proceed with an IPO built on fraud and theft of intellectual property, which I will contest publicly and legally with the evidence you've just seen. Or, I switched to my final slide, showing the outlines of my future projects, their projected valuations highlighted in bold. We can find a more productive solution. The numbers on the screen were staggering, potential valuations that would double or even triple what they'd been discussing. Projects only I fully understood, partnerships only I could facilitate. These are the next-generation innovations I've been developing. None are formally documented in company systems yet. They exist in my mind and in preliminary research I've conducted privately. Their potential value to this IPO and beyond is, as you can see, substantial. The board chairman cleared his throat. And what exactly are you proposing, Ms. Reynaud? A restructuring of my relationship with Reynaud Technologies. I want full autonomy for the innovation division with guaranteed funding for 5 years, regardless of IPO performance or management changes. Dr. Wei installed as permanent co-director with equal authority. My team protected from any reorganization. I paused, then delivered the key demand. And for myself, restoration of all equity positions, board membership with protected voting rights, and public acknowledgement of my role in building the innovation portfolio that's driving this IPO. My father's face had gone from pale to crimson. This is extortion. This is negotiation, I corrected. Something you should have tried before conspiring to destroy my career and steal my work. The chairman looked troubled. We would need to discuss these terms. You have 24 hours, I interrupted smoothly. After that, my evidence goes to the SEC, the financial press, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. I imagine the IPO timeline would be significantly impacted. I stood, gathering my tablet. I've prepared a preliminary agreement that addresses all these points. Dr. Wei has copies. I suggest you review it carefully. As I turned to leave, my father finally exploded. You ungrateful! After everything I've given you, this is how you repay the family legacy? I stopped at the door and looked back at him, feeling strangely calm. You didn't give me anything, Father. Everything I have, I built, and a legacy built on lies isn't worth preserving. The boardroom door closed behind me with a soft click that somehow sounded like freedom. In the elevator down to the lobby, the adrenaline finally hit me. My hands trembled slightly as I pressed the button for the ground floor. I'd just confronted one of the most powerful tech magnates in the world, who also happened to be my father, with evidence of his conspiracy against me in front of his entire board of directors. There was no turning back now. Outside, rain had started to fall, typical Seattle weather returning after the morning's deceptive sunshine. I walked several blocks before calling Julian from my secure phone. It's done, I said when he answered. Exactly as planned. They have 24 hours to accept my terms. Are you okay? His voice was warm with concern. I searched for the right word. Not fine, too hollow, not good, too simple for the complex emotions coursing through me. I'm free, I finally said. For the first time, maybe ever. Where are you now? Walking, thinking. I need some space before the next phase. Of course, just be careful. They won't take this lying down. He was right, of course. I'd declared war on people who'd never learned to lose gracefully. They would counterattack. The only question was how and when. I found myself wandering toward Pike Place Market, drawn to its energy and anonymity. Among the crowds of tourists and locals, I was just another face, not an heiress, not a tech executive, not a Reynaud. Just a woman in a black turtleneck, invisible in the best possible way. I bought a coffee from a small stand and found a quiet corner overlooking Elliott Bay. The ferry was crossing from Bainbridge Island, tiny against the vastness of the water. I remembered taking that ferry as a child, standing at the railing with my mother before she died, feeling like we were suspended between worlds. That's where I was now, suspended between my old life and whatever came next. I'd burned the bridge back, but hadn't yet built the path forward. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Wei. Emergency board session continuing. Your father, Isabel, and Winters in private conference. Board members requesting independent verification of evidence. Will update when possible. They were scrambling as expected. Good. Let them feel a fraction of the disorientation I'd felt on that plane. I spent the afternoon moving between public spaces, never staying anywhere too long. The Seattle Public Library, a busy cafe in Capitol Hill, a bookstore in the University District. Always watching for followers, always planning my next move. By evening, I was exhausted, but unwilling to check into a hotel where I might be traced. Instead, I found myself at the door of an old friend, Mei Lin, a former Reynaud engineer who'd left to start her own company years ago. Someone my family wouldn't think to monitor. Sophia? She looked shocked when she opened her apartment door. What are you doing here? I need a place to stay, just for tonight. I can't explain everything, but... Come in, she said without hesitation, pulling me inside. You look like you've been through hell. Her one-bedroom apartment in Fremont was small but comfortable, filled with books and plants and prototypes of her latest inventions. She made tea and listened without interruption as I gave her the abbreviated version of what had happened. Your father always was a ruthless bastard, she said when I finished. Sorry, I know he's your dad, but no apology necessary. I sipped the tea, feeling some tension finally release from my shoulders. That's a pretty accurate description. So what happens tomorrow if they accept your terms? I rebuild, on my terms this time. I set down the cup. And if they don't, I start over completely. May leaned forward. Whatever happens, I want you to know something. What you built at Reynaud, the medical technology division, the sustainable energy projects, that work matters. It's changing lives. Whatever else your family has done, they can't take that away. Her words hit me unexpectedly hard. In all the focus on betrayal and justice, I'd almost forgotten the actual work. The innovations I'd poured my heart into, not for profit or prestige, but because they mattered. Medical devices now used in rural clinics worldwide. Energy systems, bringing power to communities off the grid. Real impact beyond spreadsheets and stock valuations. Thank you for reminding me what this is really about, I said quietly. That night, I slept fitfully on May's couch. Dreams filled with boardrooms and falling planes and endless corridors where the doors kept disappearing. I woke before dawn, checking my phone immediately. 3 messages waited, from Dr. Wei. Board in closed session until midnight. Independent verification confirmed authenticity of your evidence. Your father refusing to discuss terms directly. Chairman and lead counsel taking over negotiations. From Julian. Apex stock up 3% on rumors of leadership turmoil at Reynaud. Your move is causing ripples. Stay safe. And from an unknown number. This is Lawson. Board wishes to discuss modified terms. Neutral location. Noon today. Reply with acceptance. The chairman reaching out directly. That was unexpected. It suggested the board was taking control away. From my father, a significant shift in power. I replied simply, accepted. Send details. May was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. Any news? She asked, seeing me checking my phone. They want to meet. The board chairman, not my father. I accepted the coffee gratefully. That's a good sign. Or a trap, she cautioned. Maybe. But they have more to lose than I do at this point. I checked the time, 7:15 a.m. I need to prepare. And I could really use a shower and clean clothes. Help yourself, and I might have some things that would fit you. Nothing designer, but perfect. I cut her off with a smile. Designer is exactly what I don't want to be right now. By noon, I was seated in a private dining room at Canlis, one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants, wearing borrowed clothes that were simpler but no less dignified than my usual attire. The neutral location was a smart choice, public enough to prevent anything too dramatic, private enough for sensitive conversations. Frederick Lawson arrived precisely on time, accompanied by Patricia Hendricks, the company's lead counsel. Notably absent, my father, Isabel, or Winters. Ms. Reynaud, Lawson began after we were seated. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Yesterday's revelations were disturbing, to say the least. I imagine they were, I replied evenly. Have you had sufficient time to verify the evidence I presented? Patricia nodded. Our independent security consultant confirmed the authenticity of the logs and metadata. The board is satisfied that your allegations have merit. They're not allegations, I corrected gently. They're documented facts. Yes, well. Lawson cleared his throat. The board has authorized me to negotiate modified terms for your reintegration into the company. I'm listening. He slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to grant autonomy for the innovation division under joint leadership between you and Dr. Wei, as requested. Your equity positions will be fully restored, with additional compensation for damages. We're offering board membership, though with standard rather than protected voting rights. I opened the folder, scanning the document carefully. It was close to what I'd demanded, with some predictable pushback on the governance details. And public acknowledgement of my role? A press release announcing your return as Chief Innovation Officer, with appropriate recognition of your contributions to the company's growth and IPO positioning. I continued reading, noting the careful legal language, the contingencies, the requirements. There's no mention here of what happens to those who participated in the fraud against me. Lawson and Patricia exchanged glances. The board feels that internal disciplinary matters should remain, well, internal. Meaning my father stays as CEO, Isabel keeps her position, and Winters continues as CFO. I closed the folder. That's not acceptable. Ms. Reynaud, Patricia leaned forward. Your father founded this company. The Reynaud name, your name, is on the building. The market expects continuity of leadership through the IPO. The market also expects honest disclosure and corporate integrity. I pushed the folder back toward them. I'm not asking for public humiliation, but I won't work alongside people who conspired to destroy my career and steal my intellectual property. Lawson sighed. What specifically are you proposing? My father transitions to chairman emeritus within 6 months, a dignified exit that preserves his legacy while removing operational control. Winters resigns immediately, with a standard non-disclosure agreement. Isabel is transferred to the European division, away from Seattle operations. Your father will never agree to this, Patricia said. Then he hasn't fully grasped his position. I leaned back slightly. The evidence I have doesn't just expose a personal betrayal. It documents securities fraud and conspiracy. Criminal. Offenses that could not only derail the IPO, but result in significant legal consequences. The board has fiduciary responsibility to address this, regardless of family dynamics. The weight of my words settled across the table. Lawson removed his glasses, polishing them absently while he considered. I'll need to discuss this with the full board, he finally said. Can you give us until tomorrow morning? You have until 9 a.m., I agreed. After that, my alternate plan goes into effect. As they gathered their materials to leave, Lawson paused. May I ask you something, not as a board chairman, but as someone who's known your family for many years? I nodded cautiously. Why? Didn't you just leave? Start fresh somewhere else? You have the talent, the connections. You could have built something new without this confrontation. The question deserved honesty. Because what was taken from me wasn't just a job or money. It was my work, innovations that are helping people around the world. And because if I had walked away, they would have done this to someone else eventually. Some patterns need to be broken, not escaped. He studied me with new respect, then nodded once before departing. Alone at the table, I touched the small compass pendant Julian had given me. True north. I wasn't just fighting for my position or my pride. I was fighting for the truth, and for everyone who'd ever been silenced by power and privilege. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be erased again. The storm arrived overnight, sheets of rain pummeling Seattle with such intensity that the sound penetrated even May's well-insulated apartment. I stood by the window at 5 a.m., watching lightning illuminate the city in brief electric flashes. The weather seemed perfectly aligned with the brewing corporate tempest I'd initiated. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. A text from Dr. Wei. Emergency board meeting called for 7 a.m. Your father arrived with 3 attorneys an hour ago. So he was making his countermove. I'd expected nothing less from Antoine Reynaud, a man who'd built an empire by anticipating opponents' strategies and neutralizing them before they fully materialized. I texted back, keep me posted, and Helena, be careful. Within minutes, my phone rang. Julian. You need to see this, he said without preamble. Turn on any financial news channel. I woke May and asked to use her television. CNN's business segment was leading with the story. Breaking. Reynaud Technologies announces leadership restructuring ahead of IPO. The anchor's voice filled the room. In a surprising pre-market announcement, Tech giant Reynaud Technologies has revealed a major leadership reorganization just weeks before its highly anticipated initial public offering. CEO Antoine Reynaud will transition to executive chairman, while his daughter Sophia Reynaud will be elevated to co-CEO with a focus on innovation strategy. My breath caught. This wasn't the negotiated solution we'd discussed yesterday. This was my father seizing narrative control, making it appear as though these changes were his idea all along, a planned succession rather than a forced concession. "There's more," Julian said, still on the phone. "Keep watching." The anchor continued. The company also announced the immediate departure of CFO Theodore Winters, citing personal reasons, and the transfer of Isabelle Reynaud to lead European operations from the Paris office. Industry analysts are calling this a bold move to position the company for post-IPO growth. May looked at me with widened eyes. "Is this what you wanted?" "It's close," I admitted, still processing. "But on his terms, not mine. He's rewriting the story to maintain control of the narrative." My phone buzzed again with a text from Frederick Lawson. Press release went out under board authorization. "Your father presented this as his strategic plan. Majority approved. Terms document being delivered to you this morning. Please call me." Classic Antoine Reynaud. When cornered, don't just accept defeat. Transform it into a victory. Make it look like your idea all along. I'd seen him do this to competitors for years, but never expected to be on the receiving end of this particular tactic. "What will you do?" Julian asked, still on the line. I considered my options carefully. Fighting the narrative would mean publicly contradicting my father and the board, potentially damaging the company and the IPO. Accepting it would mean letting him control the story, as always. "I need to see the actual terms before I decide," I finally said. This might just be smoke and mirrors. An hour later, a courier arrived with a sealed envelope. Inside was a revised agreement, largely matching what Lawson and I had discussed yesterday, but with one significant addition: a mutual non-disparagement clause that would prevent me from ever discussing the circumstances that led to my temporary removal from the company. The message was clear. I could have my position back, but I had to let my father control the narrative. The family image would remain pristine, the betrayal buried, the lessons unlearned. I called Lawson immediately. "The non-disparagement clause is unacceptable. It's standard in executive agreements," he replied, sounding tired. "And frankly, it protects you as much as it protects the company. Do you really want the details of this family dispute becoming public fodder?" This wasn't a family dispute. It was fraud and conspiracy. "Sophia?" His voice softened slightly. "You've won. You're getting everything you asked for operationally. The people who wronged you are being removed or reassigned. The innovation division will be protected under your leadership. Don't let pride derail what you've accomplished." Pride. Was that what this was about? I gazed out at the rain-soaked city, considering his words. What was I really fighting for now? Justice? Recognition? Or something deeper? A fundamental reshaping of the power dynamics that had defined my life? "I need to think about this," I said finally. "You'll have my answer by noon." After ending the call, I sat in May's small kitchen, staring at the agreement that represented both victory and compromise. May placed a cup of coffee in front of me and sat down across the table. "Want to talk it through?" she offered. I looked up at her. This woman who'd walked away from Reynaud Technologies years ago to build something of her own. Something smaller, perhaps, but wholly hers. "How did you know it was time to leave?" I asked her. "What made you finally walk away?" She considered this, wrapping her hands around her own coffee mug. I realized I was spending all my energy trying to change a system that didn't want to change. Your father, the company culture, it's designed to absorb and neutralize challenges, not transform because of them. "But the work matters," I said. echoing her words from yesterday. The innovations are changing lives. Yes, she agreed. But at what cost to yours? And could you do that work somewhere else? Somewhere the soil isn't poisoned? The question hung between us, impossible to answer quickly. My phone interrupted the moment. Julian again. "Where are you?" he asked when I answered. "We need to talk in person. It's important." 20 minutes later, Julian arrived at May's apartment, rainwater dripping from his coat. His expression was grave as he pulled out his tablet and set it on the table. "Apex just received this," he said, bringing up an email. "It's from your father." The message was addressed to Julian's father, CEO of Apex Technologies. In terse, businesslike language, it outlined a proposed merger between Reynaud and Apex, a shocking proposition given the company's long-standing rivalry. More shocking was the timing, just weeks before Reynaud's IPO. "Read the third paragraph," Julian directed. I scanned down. "As part of this restructuring, Sophia will be taking an extended sabbatical following the merger transition. Her innovation portfolio will be integrated into the combined entity under new leadership. This addresses the concerns you raised about potential conflicts of interest given her personal relationship with your son." My blood turned cold. He's using us, our relationship, as a pretext to push me out again. Julian nodded grimly. "And he's trying to neutralize Apex as a potential ally for you by dangling this merger. Classic divide and conquer." "Will your father consider it?" "He's intrigued. A merger would eliminate a major competitor and potentially double market share overnight, but he's suspicious of the timing." The pieces clicked into place. My father's rapid capitulation, the press release, the leadership restructuring. It wasn't a concession. It was a tactical retreat before a bigger offensive. He was setting up a corporate chessboard where I would be sacrificed regardless of which move was made next. "I need to talk to your father," I said suddenly. "Not as your girlfriend, but as a senior executive with inside knowledge of what's really happening at Reynaud." Julian hesitated. "That puts him in a difficult position." "He's already in a difficult position. Antoine Reynaud just made sure of that." I stood up, a new clarity emerging through the fog of betrayal and negotiation. "I'm tired of reacting to my father's moves. It's time to change the game entirely." 3 hours later, I sat across from Robert Mercer in Apex's Seattle office. The elder Mercer was a formidable figure, tall, silver-haired, with the same intense focus Julian sometimes displayed in quieter moments. The resemblance between father and son was striking, though Robert's features were harder, carved by decades of corporate battles. "Ms. Reynaud," he began formally, "this is certainly an unusual situation." "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," I replied, "especially given the circumstances. Julian speaks highly of you, says you're the most innovative mind in the industry." His tone gave nothing away. "He also says your father tried to destroy your career and is now attempting to use this merger to finish the job." "That's accurate. And yet here you are, speaking to your family company's biggest competitor. Some might call that disloyal." I met his gaze unflinchingly. Loyalty should be earned, not demanded, and it should certainly be reciprocal. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed his features. "Fair enough. So what exactly are you proposing?" "Not a merger," I said firmly. "An alliance. Specifically, between Apex and the Reynaud Innovation Division as an independent entity." His eyebrows rose. "Explain." I laid out my vision. A spin-off of the Innovation Division from Reynaud Technologies, backed by Apex Investment. The division would become its own company, taking its projects, patents, and team intact. Reynaud would retain minority ownership and preferred licensing rights, while Apex would gain access to breakthrough technologies without the entanglements of a full merger. This way, Reynaud still has its IPO. Apex gains strategic advantages without the merger complications. And the innovation work continues unimpeded by corporate politics. I paused. Everyone wins. Except Antoine, Robert noted. He loses direct control of the division driving his IPO valuation. He keeps enough connection to maintain investor confidence. And he gets what he really wants, me out of the main company structure. Robert leaned back, studying me with new interest. You're willing to walk away from your family legacy? The Reynaud name? I'm not walking away from anything. I'm building something better. I slid a folder across the desk, the detailed spin-off proposal I'd been working on through the night. The legacy that matters isn't a name on a building. It's the impact of the work. He opened the folder, scanning the contents with practiced efficiency. This would take months to negotiate and implement. Not necessarily. The groundwork is already there in the restructuring my father announced this morning. We just redirect. Terse, I smiled slightly. He's already told the world I'll be leading innovation strategy. This just clarifies what that really means. Robert spent several minutes reviewing the documents, asking occasional pointed questions about valuations, patent ownership, and team structures. Finally, he closed the folder and looked up. You're definitely Antoine's daughter, he said, though the words held no criticism. This is bold, creative, and more than a little audacious. I'll need to review it with our executive team. Of course, but time is essential. My father is moving quickly. He nodded once. I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow morning. As I rose to leave, he added, Whatever happens with this proposal, Ms. Reynaud, you've impressed me today. Not many people would have the courage to reimagine their path so completely after what you've been through. His words stayed with me as I left the Apex building, stepping out into a Seattle afternoon where the storm had finally cleared, leaving the air scrubbed clean and the sky patched with breaks of blue between retreating clouds. For the first time, in days, I felt like I could breathe fully. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Wei. Your father is looking for you. Board wants your signed agreement by 5 p.m. What should I tell them? I texted back, Tell them I'm finalizing my terms. Will deliver in person. It was time to change the narrative, not by fighting my father's version of the story, but by writing an entirely new one. I spent the next 2 hours in a quiet corner of the Seattle Public Library, refining my spin-off proposal based on Robert Mercer's questions and observations. The plan was taking shape, not just as a corporate restructuring, but as a vision for what the innovation work could become when freed from Reynaud's rigid hierarchy and profit-first mentality. By 4:30 p.m., I was walking into Reynaud Tower, my borrowed clothes replaced with a simple but elegant pantsuit May had helped me purchase. This time, I didn't use the service entrance or borrowed credentials. I walked directly through the main lobby, head high, as employees stopped and stared. Word had clearly spread about the morning's announcement. People whispered as I passed, some offering tentative smiles, others quickly averting their eyes. I was simultaneously the returning heir and the family rebel, a contradiction that seemed to both fascinate and unnerve them. I took the main elevator to the executive floor, where my father's assistant Claire looked up in shock as I approached. Ms. Reynaud, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow's transition meeting. Plans change, Claire. Is he in? Yes, but he's on a call with... I walked past her desk without slowing. Thank you. I opened my father's office door without knocking, a deliberate echo of my boardroom entrance yesterday. He was indeed on a call, seated behind his massive desk with its panoramic view of the Seattle skyline. His expression shifted from annoyance to wariness when he saw me. I'll call you back, he said to whoever was on the line, hanging up without waiting for a response. Sophia, this is unexpected. Is it? I closed the door behind me. You made a unilateral announcement about my future this morning. Did you think I wouldn't have something to say about that? He gestured to the chair across from him. I assumed Lawson had communicated the terms. Everything you asked for has been granted. Almost everything, I corrected, remaining standing. But that's not why I'm here. I placed my own folder on his desk, not the signed agreement he was expecting, but my spin-off proposal. This is my counteroffer. He didn't open it. Counteroffer to what? You've been reinstated with full authority. The board has approved your return. What more? Could you possibly want? Independence. The word hung between us. I watched confusion, then realization. Then the first flickers of alarm cross his face. You can't seriously be suggesting a spin-off of the innovation division into a separate entity? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Reynaud Technologies retains minority ownership and preferred licensing rights. The division becomes its own company with its own governance and funding structure. He finally opened the folder, scanning the contents with increasing dismay. This is absurd. The innovation division is integral to our IPO valuation. The board would never approve. They might, if the alternative is exposure of the fraud perpetrated by the CEO and CFO. I sat down now, leaning forward slightly. But more importantly, they might approve when they see the strategic partnership opportunity. His eyes narrowed. What partnership? Apex Technologies has expressed interest in backing the spin-off. Not a full merger, as you proposed to Robert Mercer this morning, but a targeted investment in the innovation work. The color drained from his face. You've been talking to Mercer. Just as you have. The difference is, my proposal doesn't require sacrificing me to make it work. For perhaps the first time in my life, I saw Antoine Reynaud genuinely speechless. He stared at the proposal, then at me, struggling to recalibrate his understanding of the situation. This would never work, he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. The logistics alone are all outlined in the document. The timing aligns perfectly with your announced leadership restructuring. The market will see it as visionary corporate strategy, not the result of internal conflict. I smiled slightly. Your public image remains intact. Isn't that what you care about most? He pushed the folder away. You'd walk away from your birthright? From the Reynaud legacy? I'm not walking away from anything. I'm building something better, something true to the work itself, rather than the ego attached to it. I stood again. The legacy that matters isn't the name, Father. It's the impact. He studied me with new eyes, not as his daughter or his executive, but as an opponent he hadn't fully measured until now. You're serious about this? Completely. The board will receive the full proposal tomorrow morning, along with supporting analysis from independent advisors. I suggest you spend tonight deciding which side of this transformation you want to be on. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Sophia, you can't just... I paused at the door. I already have. The only question is whether you'll fight a losing battle or help shape a winning future. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and strategic planning. Robert Mercer confirmed Apex's interest in the spin-off partnership, contingent on due diligence and board approval. Dr. Wei mobilized key innovation team members, securing their commitment to the new structure. Julian worked tirelessly on the financial models, demonstrating how the spin-off would actually increase Reynaud's IPO value by creating a clear strategic partnership narrative. By the time the Reynaud board convened for its emergency session, we had built an irresistible case, one that transformed what could have been a damaging family scandal into an innovative corporate strategy that financial analysts were already cautiously praising based on preliminary leaks. I wasn't in the boardroom for the vote. Instead, I waited in a small conference room down the hall, Julian beside me, both of us exhausted but too wired to relax. Whatever happens, he said, squeezing my hand, you've already won. You refuse to be erased or controlled. That's a victory in itself. I leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. Thank you for standing with me through this. It couldn't have been easy, caught between family loyalties. There was never a question of where I stood, he said simply. True north, remember? I touched the compass pendant still hanging around. My neck, a tangible reminder of integrity in a world of shifting truths. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened and Frederick Lawson entered, his expression carefully neutral. The board has voted, he announced, 8-3 in favor of the spin-off, with conditional terms as outlined in your proposal. Relief washed through me, so powerful it was almost dizzying. And my father? Abstained from voting, but he did make a statement accepting the board's decision and expressing support for the new strategic direction. Lawson's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing a hint of admiration. It's quite remarkable, Ms. Reynaud. You've managed to transform a potentially devastating situation into something the entire market is now watching with interest. Not just the market, I said quietly. People who need the medical technologies we're developing. Communities waiting for sustainable energy solutions. They're the real stakeholders in all of this. He nodded, seemingly surprised by this perspective. The formal announcement will be made tomorrow. There will be transition details to work out, of course, but the fundamental structure has been approved. After he left, Julian pulled me into a tight embrace. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected, thinking of everyone who had helped make this possible. Dr. Wei, May, Captain Alvarez, and Julian himself. People who had stood by truth when it would have been easier to look away. Later that evening, as Julian and I celebrated quietly at a small restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message from my father. Office, 8 a.m. tomorrow, before the announcement. No explanation, no context. Just a summons in his typically terse style. I showed Julian the message. Are you going to go? He asked cautiously. I considered it briefly. Yes. Whatever he has to say, I should hear it. This chapter needs a proper ending before the new one begins. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the recent storm's cleansing effect still evident in the unusually blue Seattle sky. I arrived at Reynaud Tower at precisely 8 a.m., taking the executive elevator directly to my father's office. He was standing by the window when I entered, gazing out at the city that had watched the Reynaud name rise to prominence over the past 30 years. He turned as the door closed behind me, his expression unreadable. Sophia. He gestured to the sitting area rather than his desk, a subtle shift from power dynamics to something more personal. I took a seat, waiting for him to speak first. He seemed older somehow, the events of the past week having carved new lines around his eyes and mouth. I underestimated you, he finally said, a mistake I won't make again. It wasn't an apology. I hadn't expected one. I learned from watching you all these years. Strategic thinking, leveraging advantages, creating opportunities from challenges. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. So you did. Though I never anticipated those lessons would be used against me. They weren't meant to be used against anyone. Just to protect what matters, the work, the people who depend on it, the future it can create. He nodded slowly, processing this. The spin-off announcement goes out in an hour. The narrative positions it as a visionary restructuring to maximize innovation potential through strategic partnership. No mention of recent disagreements. That's appropriate, I agreed. The public story should focus on the future, not the past. And what about our story, Sophia? The family narrative? The question caught me off guard, not the content, but the hint of genuine uncertainty in his voice. For a man who had always controlled every aspect of the Reynaud image, this represented unprecedented vulnerability. That depends on you, I said honestly. I'm not interested in perpetuating conflict. but I won't pretend the past didn't happen either. He crossed to a side table where a document lay waiting. This is my personal letter supporting the spin-off. Not the corporate statement, my own perspective as founder and father. He handed it to me. I'd appreciate your thoughts before it's released. I scanned the letter, expecting corporate platitudes. Instead, I found something unexpected, an acknowledgement of different visions for the future and the courage to forge new paths. Not quite an admission of wrongdoing, but a recognition of my autonomy and vision that he'd never expressed before. This is unexpected, I said, looking up at him. Is it acceptable? He asked, and I realized he genuinely wanted to know. Yes, I said simply. It's a good starting point. He took the letter back, placing it carefully on his desk. The board meeting to finalize transition details is at noon. I assume you'll be there. Of course. As I stood to leave, he added, The Reynaud name will always be part of who you are, Sophia, even if it's not on your new company letterhead. I know, but it's not all I am. I paused at the door. The new company will be called Phoenix Horizons, not to reject the past, but to build something that can rise above it. Something shifted in his expression, not quite approval, but perhaps a reluctant respect. Phoenix. Appropriate. Outside, the city sparkled in the morning sunlight, buildings gleaming like possibilities waiting to be realized. I texted Julian, It's done. Meet me for coffee before the board meeting? His reply came immediately. Already waiting. Blue Ridge. Cafe, got your favorite table by the window. I smiled, picturing him there, my unexpected ally who had become so much more. As I walked through the lobby of Reynaud Tower, employees nodded respectfully, some even offering congratulations on the exciting new venture they'd heard rumors about. No one looked away anymore. No one whispered behind their hands. I wasn't the family disappointment or the corporate victim or even the returning heir. I was simply Sophia, the woman who had refused to be erased, who had transformed betrayal into opportunity, who had found strength in the very challenges meant to destroy her. Outside, I paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the Reynaud name, emblazoned on the building. For so long, that name had defined me, constrained me, both privileged and imprisoned me. Now it was just a part of my story, not its defining chapter. I touched the compass pendant at my throat, feeling its steady weight against my skin. True north. Not a destination, but a direction. A commitment to move consistently toward what matters most, regardless of the storms that might arise. With that thought guiding me, I turned away from the tower and walked toward the cafe where Julian waited. Toward a future I was finally free to build on my own terms. I stood at the edge of a stage in San Francisco's Moscone Center, waiting for my introduction. The Global Innovation Summit had become the premier gathering for technology visionaries, and this year's keynote address, my keynote, had drawn a standing-room-only crowd. It is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, the moderator's voice echoed through the hall. In just 18 months, she has transformed a corporate spin-off into one of the most dynamic forces in humanitarian technology. Forbes recently named her among the 40 under 40, changing how business addresses global challenges. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Phoenix Horizons, Sophia Reynaud. The applause washed over me as I walked to center stage. 18 months. Sometimes it felt like a lifetime. Other times like mere moments since that turbulent week when everything changed. I gazed out at the sea of faces, industry leaders, investors, journalists, and students, all waiting to hear the story of Phoenix Horizons. But they didn't know they were really here to witness something far more powerful. What happens when betrayal becomes breakthrough? Thank you, I began, my voice steady and clear in the microphone. I'm often asked about the name Phoenix Horizons. Why a mythological bird for a cutting-edge technology company? The standard answer is that we rise above challenges to create new possibilities. That's true, but incomplete. I paused, allowing my gaze to sweep across the audience. The complete truth is that Phoenix Horizons was born from ashes. Specifically, the ashes of what happens when someone tries to erase you from your own story. The room grew quiet, sensing this wasn't the typical corporate origin tale. 18 months ago, I was literally pushed off a private jet by my own family, told coach is where you belong, and left stranded when they discovered I wouldn't be controlled. They believed fabricated evidence without question because it suited a narrative they wanted to believe. It was the most painful moment of my life, and also the most transformative. I hadn't planned to begin this way. The PR team had drafted a polished, inspirational speech that carefully avoided any mention of family conflict. But standing there, facing a room full of people chasing success and recognition, I knew they needed the real story. Not just what we had built, but how and why it mattered. That moment of betrayal forced me to confront the fundamental question we all face eventually. What do you stand for when everything is taken away? What remains when the external markers of identity and success are stripped bare? The massive screens behind me displayed Phoenix Horizons' first medical device, a portable diagnostic unit now deployed in rural clinics across Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. What remained for me was this: the work itself. Not the prestige, not the family name, not the corner office with a view. Just the fundamental belief that technology should serve humanity, not just shareholders. As I spoke, I spotted familiar faces in the audience. Dr. Wei in the front row, now my co-chief innovation officer, beaming with quiet pride. Mei Lin, whose small engineering firm had become one of our key development partners. And Julian, seated unobtrusively toward the back, his presence a constant reminder that we don't have to face our battles alone. Phoenix Horizons began with 27 people in a converted warehouse, operating on bridge financing and pure determination. Today, we're 300 strong, with offices on 3 continents and technologies serving millions of people who had been overlooked by traditional, market-driven development. I clicked to the next slide. Children in a remote Kenyan village using our solar-powered water purification system. This isn't charity, it's strategic investment in the future of humanity. When we make clean water accessible, those children can attend school instead of walking miles each day for basic necessities. When we deploy low-cost diagnostic tools, local healthcare workers can identify diseases before they become epidemics. When we create solar microgrids for communities off the traditional power infrastructure, we're not just reducing carbon emissions, we're enabling economic participation for billions of people. The audience was fully engaged now, many leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't the standard tech company presentation about disruption and market dominance. This was something different: technology with purpose, profit with conscience. The most valuable lesson I've learned through this journey is that our greatest breakthroughs often come disguised as our worst setbacks. Being rejected by my family, company forced me to reimagine what a technology company could be. Not just incrementally better, but fundamentally different in its values and objectives. I clicked to a slide showing our financial performance, growth curves that would impress any investor, alongside impact metrics measuring lives improved and problems solved. We've demonstrated that purpose and profit aren't opposing forces. In fact, they're synergistic. Our investors have seen returns exceeding market averages while funding technologies that address real human needs. Our team members bring their whole selves to work because they know their efforts matter beyond the next quarterly report. As I concluded the formal presentation and moved to the Q&A portion, hands shot up throughout the audience. The moderator selected a woman in business, attire near the front. Your former family company, Reynaud Technologies, has struggled since their IPO, with stock prices falling nearly 30% in the past year. How do you respond to analysts who suggest your departure was the beginning of their decline? The question created a ripple of tension through the room. It was the elephant everyone knew about but few dared mention directly. The contrast between Phoenix Horizons' meteoric rise and Reynaud Technologies' struggling performance. I took a measured breath before responding. I don't celebrate anyone's challenges, including theirs. The technology sector has faced headwinds across the board this year. What I will say is that innovation requires a certain culture, one that values diverse perspectives, encourages appropriate risk, and maintains ethical guardrails. Companies that cultivate that culture tend to thrive long-term, regardless of market fluctuations. The diplomatic response satisfied the questioner without creating inflammatory headlines. I'd learned when to speak truth boldly and when to exercise restraint, another lesson from the crucible of that transformative week. After fielding several more questions about our technology roadmap and expansion plans, the moderator selected a young woman near the back. You mentioned being pushed off a private jet by your family. That sounds traumatic. How did you find the emotional resilience to build something new instead of being consumed by anger or resentment? The room grew quiet again. It was the most personal question of the session, cutting to the heart of what everyone really wanted to know. Not just the what and how, but the why and how it felt. That's an excellent question, I said, allowing the vulnerability to show in my voice. The truth is, I wasn't immediately resilient. There were dark moments, nights in hotel rooms when the pain felt overwhelming, days when doubt whispered that maybe they were right about me. I stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the audience. What saved me wasn't some innate strength or special wisdom. It was connection, people who saw my value when I couldn't see it myself, a pilot who risked his job to help me, a former colleague who offered her couch when I had nowhere to go, a partner who believed in me when the evidence suggested I was finished. I glanced briefly toward Julian. And beyond personal connections, what sustained me was purpose. Knowing that the technologies we were developing could transform lives gave me a reason to get up each morning, regardless of what had been taken from me. I scanned the audience, making eye contact with various attendees. I suspect everyone in this room has faced moments of rejection or betrayal. Perhaps not as dramatic as being kicked off a private jet, but painful nonetheless. What I learned is that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about what you reach for when you're getting back up. Reach for purpose. Reach for authentic connection. Reach for the work that matters beyond yourself. Those anchors will hold when everything else gives way. The woman who asked the question nodded, visibly moved. I could see others in the audience, subtly wiping away tears or nodding in recognition of their own battles, publicly acknowledged or privately endured. As the session concluded to enthusiastic applause, I felt a familiar mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Public speaking had never been my favorite activity at Reynaud Technologies, where I'd been more comfortable in research labs than boardrooms. But at Phoenix Horizons, sharing our vision had become essential, not just for business growth, but for the movement we were building around purpose-driven technology. Backstage, Julian was waiting with a bottle of water and that smile that still made my heart skip after all these months. That wasn't the speech we rehearsed, he said, handing me the water. No, I admitted, taking a grateful sip. It wasn't. It was better. Much better. He squeezed my hand. You spoke truth without bitterness. That's rare and powerful. We were interrupted by a small crowd of people waiting to speak with me. Potential investors, partnership opportunities, journalists seeking interviews. The momentum behind Phoenix Horizons was building faster than we could have imagined, creating both opportunities and challenges. Hours later, after the last meeting and the final handshake, Julian and I escaped to a quiet restaurant overlooking San Francisco Bay. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold and crimson, a fitting backdrop for reflection. I got a strange email today. I said as we waited for our meals. From Isabel. Julian raised an eyebrow. Your stepsister? I thought she was still in Paris. She is, apparently struggling. I twisted my water glass slowly. She's asking for a job at Phoenix Horizons. You're kidding. His surprise was understandable. Isabel had been central to the conspiracy against me, her jealousy and ambition driving much of the family dynamics. What are you going to do? I'd been asking myself the same question since the email arrived. I don't know yet. Part of me wants to respond with a single word, karma. But that's not who I want to be. No, it's not, Julian agreed. But that doesn't mean you owe her anything either. I know, but there's something about her request that feels important. Not for her, but for me. A test of sorts. Of what? Of whether I meant what I said on that stage today. About purpose? Over resentment. About building something better, not just different. I looked out at the bay, where boats were returning to harbor as darkness fell. Maybe there's a middle path. Julian reached across the table, taking my hand. Whatever you decide, make. Sure, it's for the right reasons. Not obligation, not guilt, not even forgiveness if you're not ready for that. Do it because it aligns with who you are now and who you're becoming. His wisdom, as always, cut through the noise to the heart of the matter. Who was I becoming? That question had shaped every decision since that fateful day on the Reynaud jet. The next morning, I woke early in our hotel suite and sat by the window with my laptop, composing a careful response to Isabel. I received your email requesting employment at Phoenix Horizons. While a direct position isn't possible given our history, I'm willing to offer something different. Phoenix has a foundation that funds entrepreneurs developing solutions for underserved communities. If you have a genuine project proposal that aligns with our mission, the foundation would consider an application. This isn't charity or forgiveness. It's an opportunity to build something of your own, based on merit rather than family connection. The choice is yours. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It wasn't about giving Isabel what she wanted. It was about offering what she might actually need, a chance to create value rather than just extract it. Later that day, as we prepared to leave San Francisco, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over a year. My father. I hesitated, then answered. Hello, Father. Sophia. His voice sounded older, more strained than I remembered. I saw your keynote online. It was illuminating. I waited, unsure where this was heading. You've built something remarkable, he continued when I didn't respond. Different from what I would have built, but undeniably successful. Thank you, I said simply. Compliments from Antoine Reynaud had always been rare and precisely measured. Reynaud Technologies is struggling, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. The innovation pipeline has dried up. The market is questioning our relevance. Now I understood the purpose of the call. I'm sorry to hear that. Competition is challenging for everyone right now. It's more than market conditions. It's vision, or the lack thereof. He paused. The board is considering strategic options, a potential sale or significant restructuring. The implications were clear. Reynaud Technologies, the company my grandfather had founded, that my father had built into an empire, that had been the center of our family identity for generations, was facing possible dissolution. What are you asking of me exactly? I kept my voice neutral, though my mind was racing. Not asking, informing. Another pause. You deserve to know. Whatever happened between us, the Reynaud name is part of your history, and his voice faltered slightly. I may have been wrong about some things. From Antoine Reynaud, this qualified half-admission was the closest thing to an apology I would likely ever receive. I felt a complex wave of emotions, vindication, sadness, a strange sense of closure. "Thank you for telling me," I said finally. "I hope you find the right path forward." After we hung up, I stood by the hotel window, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline. Julian found me there minutes later, immediately sensing something had changed. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. I told him about the call, about Reynaud, technology's struggles, about my father's oblique admission of error. "How do you feel about it?" Julian asked when I finished. "Complicated," I admitted. "Part of me feels validated, even a little triumphant. But mostly, I just feel free. Like the last tether to that old life has been cut." He wrapped his arms around me from behind, both of us looking out at the city below. "What happens to Reynaud Technologies doesn't define Phoenix Horizons. That's the whole point, isn't it?" "Yes." I leaned back against him, drawing strength from his steadiness. "And whatever my father decides, it doesn't change our path forward." 3 days later, we were back in Seattle at Phoenix Horizons headquarters, the renovated warehouse that had started as a temporary solution and evolved into a space that perfectly embodied our company culture. Open collaborative areas flowed into quiet focus rooms. Laboratory spaces with cutting-edge equipment adjoined community areas where local students came for STEM workshops. Natural light poured through skylights onto living walls of plants that improved air quality while connecting people to nature. The weekly leadership meeting was just concluding when my assistant appeared at the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." I was about to defer the unexpected visitor to a scheduled time when my assistant added, "It's Vivienne Reynaud, your stepmother." The room fell silent. Dr. Wei, who knew the full history, gave me a concerned look. "It's okay," I assured everyone. "We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. Thank you all." As the team filed out, I took a moment to center myself. Vivienne had been the silent partner in my family's betrayal. Not the architect, but a willing participant who had sat in judgment without asking a single question in my defense. "Send her in," I told my assistant. Vivienne entered hesitantly, looking both out of place and diminished in the creative industrial space. Her designer outfit and perfect makeup couldn't disguise the strain evident in her features. She clutched an expensive handbag like a shield. "Sophia," she began, her voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." "What can I do for you, Vivienne?" I remained standing, keeping my desk between us. "I've come to apologize." The words seemed to surprise her as much as me. What we did, what I allowed to happen, was unforgivable. I studied her carefully, looking for the manipulation behind the sentiment. "Why now? It's been over a year and a half." She set her bag down, a gesture of unexpected vulnerability. "Because I finally understood what happened. Truly understood." She met my eyes directly. "I found evidence on your father's computer. The original plans to force you out before the IPO. Emails between him and Isabel discussing how to create a believable narrative." "You're just discovering this now?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "I suspected earlier," she admitted. "But I didn't want to see it. It was easier to believe you had done something wrong than to accept that my husband and daughter could be so calculated." I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "Your father is selling the company," she said after a moment. "The announcement goes out next week. It's being acquired by Meridian Group and broken into divisions. The Reynaud name will essentially disappear from the technology landscape." The news wasn't entirely surprising after my father's call, but the finality of it still landed with weight. Generations of family identity dissolved in a corporate transaction. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "No, you're not," Vivienne said with unexpected perception. "And you shouldn't be. The company lost its soul, Perhaps it never truly had one. She hesitated. I've left him, Sophia. After 30 years, I finally saw clearly what I'd been enabling. Not just with you, but with everyone. The pattern of using people, discarding them when they became inconvenient. This revelation did surprise me. Vivian had always seemed the quintessential corporate wife, elegant, supportive, willing to look the other way in exchange for privilege and security. "What will you do now?" I asked, my hostility softening despite myself. "Start over. At 57. She attempted a smile. Terrifying, but also strangely liberating. "I've secured my financial independence. The rest I'll figure out as I go." I recognized something in her expression, the same mix of fear and possibility I'd felt standing on that London sidewalk 18 months ago, forcibly ejected from one life and uncertain about the next. "Why tell me this?" I asked. "We were never particularly close, even before everything happened. Because you deserve to know the truth, because I stood silently while they hurt you, and because—" She looked around at the vibrant, purposeful space I'd created. "Because you've shown there's a way forward after betrayal. A better way than bitterness or conformity." I considered her words carefully. Vivian hadn't come asking for a job like Isabel, or hinting at collaboration like my father's call. She'd come simply to acknowledge truth and take responsibility for her part in what happened. "Would you like some tea?" I found myself offering. "I have a few minutes before my next meeting." The simple hospitality seemed to move her more than any grand gesture could have. "I'd like that very much." As we sat in the small seating area of my office, the conversation shifted to unexpected territory, her observations about what had made Phoenix Horizons successful, insights from her years watching various businesses grow and fail, reflections on what real leadership looked like versus the performance of authority. "You know," she said as she prepared to leave, "you could have become just like him, ruthless, controlling, measuring success by domination. That would have been the easy path after what happened. Instead, you built something genuinely new." "It wasn't entirely by design," I admitted. "I just knew I didn't want to replicate the same patterns, even if they came wrapped in different packaging. That awareness itself is revolutionary." She gathered her bag, then hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness or ongoing connection. I just wanted you to know that at least one person from that part of your life recognizes the wrong that was done and the remarkable way you've risen above it." After she left, I stood by the window of my office, looking out at the Seattle skyline, where the Reynaud Tower still dominated the horizon, though soon it would bear a different name, house different dreams, represent different values. My phone buzzed with a message from Julian. "Still on for dinner with the Phoenix Educational Foundation team tonight?" I smiled, texting back, "Absolutely. 7 p.m. at Cascadia?" His reply came immediately. "Perfect. Love you." 3 simple words that carried more genuine connection than all the elaborate performances of family loyalty I'd grown up with. That evening, as we gathered with the team developing Phoenix Horizons educational initiatives, I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to build something meaningful together. Dr. Wei was explaining the new interactive science curriculum we'd developed for underserved schools. May was demonstrating the affordable tablet technology that would make it accessible even in areas with limited infrastructure. Julian was connecting potential corporate sponsors who could help scale the program nationally. None of them were related to me by blood or marriage, yet they had become something more authentic than the family that had rejected me. They were co-creators, bound by shared purpose rather than obligation or inheritance. As dinner concluded, and conversation flowed easily around dessert and coffee, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. From the humiliation of being kicked off that private jet with the cruel words, "Coach is where you belong," to building an organization that was changing thousands of lives while outperforming my family's company in both purpose and profit. The Kai path hadn't been straight or simple. There had been moments of doubt, setbacks, hard decisions, and painful growth. But through it all, one truth had become increasingly clear. What had initially felt like the worst moment of my life, that brutal rejection, had actually been the catalyst for the best version of myself to emerge. Julian caught my eye from across the table, raising an eyebrow in silent question at my momentary introspection. I smiled reassuringly, then stood and raised my glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said as conversations quieted. "To beginnings, disguised as endings, to doors that only open when others close, and to the future we're building together, not because we have to, but because we choose to." As glasses clinked and smiles brightened around the table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Not just for what we'd built, but for the difficult journey that had made it possible. My parents had kicked me off their jet, telling me coach was where I belonged. They couldn't have known they were right, but not in the way they intended. My place wasn't in the rarefied isolation of private aviation, separated from the real world by privilege and pretense. My place was exactly where I could do the most good, connected to authentic purpose and genuine relationships. In trying to diminish me, they had inadvertently set me free. And that freedom had become not just my salvation, but my greatest strength. As the evening wound down and we stepped out into the cool Seattle night, Julian took my hand, his thumb brushing over the compass pendant I still wore around my neck. "True north," he murmured, echoing the words from that first difficult week. "True north," I agreed, gazing up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. Like those distant stars, purpose had become my constant navigation point. Sometimes obscured by clouds or circumstance, but always there, always guiding the way forward. The jet had been a prison disguised as privilege. Being forced off had been my liberation. And every day since then had been a step toward a horizon I never could have imagined from within those luxurious confines. A horizon of authentic impact, meaningful connection, and the profound satisfaction of building something that truly mattered. Not because of my name, but because of my choices. Not despite being rejected, but because of it. Not as an heiress, but as a creator. The coach seat had become a throne of my own making, and I wouldn't trade it for any private jet in the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.